Have you ever wondered, can a snow sculpture come to life? What happens when a child unknowingly creates a miracle? Can innocent childhood wonder completely alter our reality? Find out the answers to these questions in The Snow Image, A Childish Miracle by the renowned author Nathaniel Hawthorne, reimagined in English only on Classic Storytime Hub.
It was a cold winter's afternoon, the kind where the sun barely breaks through the clouds, casting a pale light that feels as sharp as the air itself. The storm had passed, but the world was still wrapped in snow, pristine and fresh. Violet and Peony, two children with a sparkle of mischief in their eyes, stood by the door, begging their mother for permission to venture out. The snow was no longer the dreary falling mess it had been. Now it glimmered, reflecting the sun in 1,000 tiny diamonds, inviting them to play. Violet, the elder of the two, was known for her quiet grace. People said she was beautiful, though it wasn't just her looks that made her stand out. It was the way she moved, the way she seemed to carry the soft light of the world with her. Her brother, Peony, on the other hand, was all energy and bright colors. His round face, flushed like a flower in full bloom, always reminded everyone of sunshine and bright scarlet petals. Their mother, a woman of delicate beauty, stood in the doorway, looking out at them with a gentle smile. She had the heart of a dreamer, an artist, something ethereal that seemed to exist beyond the ordinary. She was the kind of woman who could see magic in the mundane, and though motherhood had tempered her, she still carried that spark of wonder inside her. But their father, Mr. Lindsay, was a different story. Practical to the core, he viewed the world through the lens of cold, hard logic. A man who sold hardware, who had no patience for fancy notions. His thoughts were as rigid as the iron pots he peddled, and while his heart was no less tender than anyone else's, his mind was far more stubborn. To him, everything could be explained. There were no mysteries, no surprises, just facts, plain and simple. Violet and Peony, like any children, were drawn to the allure of the snow, the way it changed the world around them. Their small garden, tucked away behind a white fence, was their kingdom. It was an ordinary place, yet today it felt like a wonderland. The pear tree, the plum trees, the rose bushes, all stripped bare by the winter, now cloaked in a blanket of snow that turned the garden into something else entirely. Even the icicles hanging from the branches looked like delicate crystals, as though the world had transformed into a frozen dream. The children, eager to dive into the mystery of the snow-covered world, begged their mother for permission, and as the sunlight danced across the frosty landscape, it seemed impossible to resist the call of the winter magic outside. "Yes, Violet, yes, my little Peony," their mother said warmly, her voice a soft melody of consent. "You may go out and play in the new snow." With a gleam of excitement, their mother wrapped them in woolen jackets, tucking them into thick padded sacks. She wound comforters around their necks, strapped striped gaiters over their little legs, and pulled on woolen mittens to protect their hands. She kissed them both, a charm of warmth to ward off the icy touch of Jack Frost. And off they went, with the light-heartedness only children possess, skipping and hopping into the heart of a towering snowdrift. Violet emerged from the white sea like a tiny snow bunting, her cheeks flushed, and Peony, his round face glowing like a winter rose, struggled free, laughing at the tangled mess of snow around him.
The garden, usually so quiet, was alive with their gleeful shouts. To anyone who might have seen them, it seemed as though the storm had come for no other reason than to create a playground just for Violet and Peony. It was as though they were made for it, made for the wild, snowy tempest and the pure, frozen beauty it left behind.
They tumbled through the snow, burying each other with handfuls of powdery white, their laughter echoing in the crisp air. Violet, wiping a tear from her eye, paused for a moment and looked at Peony, her gaze lighting up with an idea. "You look just like a snow sculpture, Peony," she said, her voice bubbling with mischief. "If only your cheeks weren't so red. Wait, I've got it. Let's make our very own snow image. A little girl, just like us. She can be our sister, and she'll play with us all winter long. Won't that be amazing?" Peony's face lit up with excitement. "Oh, yes, that will be so fun, and Mama will see her too." Violet nodded, her eyes gleaming with the joy of the thought. "Of course Mama will see her, but she mustn't come inside the warm parlor. Our snow sister won't like the warmth, you know." With that, they set to work, hands moving with the fervor of artists in the making. Their mother, sitting by the window, overheard their serious chatter. A smile tugged at her lips, watching the children with their innocent determination. There was something almost magical about the way they went about it. To anyone else, the task might have seemed impossible, creating a living girl out of snow. But to Violet and Peony, there was no question in their minds. To them, the idea was simple, as natural as the snow falling from the sky. They didn't doubt for a second that their dream could be made real, as if the world itself had simply been waiting for their hands to shape it. And perhaps this kind of innocent, unwavering belief is the very thing that makes miracles possible. Their mother, watching them from the window, couldn't help but smile at their earnestness. She too knew that if miracles were to happen, they would come from hearts like theirs, open, pure, and untainted by skepticism. The fresh snow, untouched and sparkling, was perfect for their task, though it was so cold that she wondered if it might freeze their little fingers. She watched them, mesmerized. Violet, though young, moved with the elegance of someone far older. She was tall for her age, with the grace of a dancer, her every movement a soft expression of beauty, like a fleeting thought made flesh. Peony, in contrast, was solid and sturdy, his round figure bursting with energy as he rolled along in the snow. He was less like a dancer and more like a little soldier, determined and full of life. The mother returned to her work. What it was she couldn't quite remember. Perhaps she was stitching Violet's bonnet or mending one of Peony's small stockings. But each time she tried to focus, her gaze drifted back to the window, drawn again to the sight of their children. What a joy it was to watch them. They were like two little artists, completely absorbed in their task. Violet took the lead, her delicate hands shaping the finer details of the snow figure with surprising skill. Peony, eager to help, followed her instructions, his movements slightly clumsy but full of enthusiasm. It didn't seem as though they were building the snow girl at all. It was as though the figure was emerging by itself, as if it were always meant to be there, just waiting for the children to discover it. And the longer the mother watched, the more she felt something strange stirring within her. It wasn't just that the children were creating something beautiful. It was the way the snow seemed to take form under their hands, as though it had a life of its own. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but there was something almost magical about the whole scene. "What remarkable children I have," thought the mother, a soft smile tugging at her lips, filled with the pride only a mother can know. She couldn't help but laugh at herself for feeling so proud, as though the mere act of building a snow figure was some kind of extraordinary feat. What other children could create something so lifelike from snow on their very first try? Her smile faded into a contented hum as she turned her attention to Peony's frock. His grandfather was coming the next day, and she wanted him to look handsome, as all good grandfathers expect. The needle glided through the fabric, rhythmically stitching the seams as her thoughts danced between the task at hand and the cheerful sounds of her children outside. The snow was still falling gently, but the air was full of their voices, light and lively, like music carried on the wind. She could only catch bits and pieces of their conversation, but it was enough. The sound of their happiness, their eagerness, it was a melody in itself. She couldn't quite hear every word, but there was a sweetness in the air, a feeling that they were absorbed in something magical. And as much as she worked, as much as the needle traveled through the cloth, she felt lighter just by listening to the joy outside. Occasionally, Violet's voice rose above the others, sharp and clear, cutting through the stillness of the room. The mother's heart fluttered, drawn to the words, even if they didn't mean much in the grand scheme of things. But to her, it was as if the echoes were something far grander, a hidden song of wonder. Because a mother's heart listens differently, deeper than anyone else's. She could hear the beauty in a laugh, the poetry in a simple phrase, the trills of what seemed like celestial music floating just out of reach of the outside world. "Peony, Peony," Violet called out, her voice ringing through the garden. "Bring me some of that fresh snow, the kind from the farthest corner where we haven't trampled. I need it to shape our snow sister's chest. It has to be pure, just like when it came from the sky." Peony, his steps heavy in the snow, called back in his cheerful yet earnest voice, "Here it is, Violet." His tone was thick with excitement, yet somehow endearing in its innocence. He struggled through the half-packed drifts, his cheeks red from the cold. "Here's the snow for her little chest. Oh, Violet, look at her. She's already so beautiful." "Yes," Violet murmured softly, her voice almost reverent. "Our snow sister really does look lovely. I didn't know, Peony, that we could make such a sweet little girl out of snow." The mother, listening from the warmth of the house, couldn't help but smile to herself, her heart swelling with pride and something else, something almost mystical. What if fairies, no, angel children from paradise came to play with her own little ones, helping them create this snow image with celestial hands? Perhaps Violet and Peony wouldn't even know the angels were there. They would simply see the snow figure growing more beautiful by the moment, as if touched by a hidden, otherworldly force. They would think it was their own doing. My little girl and boy deserve playmates like that, she thought wistfully, her motherly pride deepening. She smiled to herself again, the image of invisible golden-haired children dancing with her own filling her imagination. In the soft, golden light of the room, she half expected to glance out the window and see them, playful, ethereal, glowing with innocence, joining in the creation of the snow girl, their presence as invisible as the air. For a moment, the only sound in the house was the muffled hum of the children's voices, bright and earnest, mixing in a quiet, harmonious rhythm. Violet, the leader, directed Peony with gentle authority as they worked together. Peony, in his clumsy yet determined way, was the laborer, scrambling to gather snow from all corners of their little kingdom. But even in his small hands there was a certain understanding of the task at hand. "Peony, Peony!" Violet's voice rang out as she called her brother from the far side of the garden. "Bring me those delicate wreaths of snow that have settled on the branches of the pear tree. You can climb the snowdrift, Peony, and reach them easily. I need them to make some ringlets for our snow sister's head." Peony's answer came immediately, his voice full of enthusiasm and a childlike joy. "Here they are, Violet. Take care, don't break them. Well done, well done. It's so pretty." "Doesn't she look lovely?" Violet's voice was full of satisfaction, her words almost a sigh of contentment. "But now we need some little bits of ice, just tiny, shining pieces for her eyes. She's not finished yet. Mama will see how beautiful she is, but Papa, he'll just say, 'Tush, nonsense, come in out of the cold.'" Peony, eager to share their creation, bounced on his feet.
"Let's call Mama to look," he cried, and before Violet could stop him, he shouted at the top of his lungs, "Mama! Mama! Mama! Come look, see what a nice little girl we're making." The mother paused her work, setting down the needle as she heard the excited call. She looked out the window, but the sun, low and heavy in the sky as it always was on the shortest days of the year, sent a blinding light straight into her eyes. It was almost as though the world itself had been set on fire, the brightness overwhelming. She squinted, trying to make out the scene in the garden, but everything was a haze of light and snow, dancing in the reflection of the fading day. And yet, through the brilliant blur, she caught sight of something, a small white figure standing in the garden. It had a shape, a presence that felt strangely human, as though it were more than just snow. Her gaze shifted, and she saw Violet and Peony still hard at work, their movements fluid and precise. Peony was bringing more snow, his face flushed with excitement, while Violet, delicate and focused, was shaping the figure with the care of a master sculptor, her hands adding the snow as though it were clay. Despite the dazzling light, the mother couldn't help but think to herself that she'd never seen a snow figure so intricately formed, nor such perfect little children creating it. She smiled to herself, proud as ever. "They do everything better than other children," she murmured with a soft chuckle. "No wonder they make better snow images." She returned to her task, her fingers moving swiftly, driven by the ticking clock. Twilight was creeping in, and Peony's frock was still unfinished. Grandfather was coming tomorrow, and the day was slipping away too quickly. Faster and faster her needle flew through the fabric, as the children's voices still rang in her ears, a pleasant melody of their joy. The garden was quiet, but the work was far from over.
The mother couldn't help but chuckle to herself as she listened to her children's innocent musings. It was amusing, in a way, to see how their imaginations had blended with reality, pulling them deeper into the world they were creating. They seemed to believe that their snow child would come alive, that she would run, play, and live among them. "What a perfect playmate she'll be for us all winter long," Violet said, her voice full of childlike excitement. "I hope Papa won't be afraid of her giving us a cold. Won't you love her, Peony?" "Oh, yes," Peony cried, his voice full of enthusiasm. "I'll hug her, and she'll sit right by me and drink my warm milk." Violet shook her head with the seriousness of an older sister. "Oh no, Peony, that won't do at all. Warm milk isn't good for our little snow sister. Snow people, like her, only eat icicles. No warm drinks for her." She said it with such authority that Peony had no choice but to nod, as though this explanation made perfect sense. There was a brief moment of silence as Peony, full of energy, darted off to the other side of the garden again. Violet, however, remained by their creation, her eyes fixed on the snow child, her mind filled with wonder. Suddenly, Violet's voice rang out, loud and joyful. "Look, Peony, come quickly. A light is shining on her cheek from that rose-colored cloud, and it hasn't gone away. Isn't that beautiful?" Peony, always ready to agree, rushed back to her side. "Yes, it's beautiful," he said slowly, making sure to enunciate every syllable. "Oh, Violet, look at her hair. It's all gold." Violet nodded with calm certainty, as this were the most natural thing in the world. "Of course, that color comes from the golden clouds in the sky. She's almost finished now, but her lips, they need to be very red, redder than her cheeks. Maybe, Peony, if we both kiss them, it'll make them red." The mother, sitting by the window, heard two sharp little smacks, Violet and Peony kissing the snow figure's frozen lips. The moment felt almost too real, but when Violet pulled back, she frowned slightly, clearly unsatisfied with the result. "Not red enough," she muttered, before quickly coming up with another idea.
Let's ask our snow sister to kiss Peony's cheek. That should do it." Peony grinned, his cheek flushed with excitement. "Come, little snow sister, kiss me," he called out, holding his cheek out as though the snow child could hear him. Violet stepped back with a satisfied nod. "There, she's kissed you now, Peony, and her lips are so much redder, she even blushed a little." Peony laughed, his voice full of playful amazement. "Oh, what a cold kiss!" Just then, a brisk breeze of the pure west wind swept through the garden, rattling the parlor windows with a cold, sharp sound. The air was so frigid that the mother, still sitting by the window, was about to tap on the glass with her thimbled finger, calling her children inside. But before she could move, a voice rang out. Two voices, in fact, calling to her in unison. It wasn't the tone of surprise she expected, but one of unmistakable excitement, as though they had been waiting for this moment, anticipating it all along.
"Mama, Mama, we finished our little snow sister, and she's running around the garden with us." The mother paused, her fingers frozen over the fabric of Peony's frock. "What imaginative little creatures they are," she thought, smiling as she stitched the final thread. But something else stirred inside her, a strange warmth that made her heart flutter. "And it's strange," she thought again, "that they can make me almost as much a child as they are. I can hardly believing that the snow image has really come to life." Violet's voice broke through her thoughts. "Dear Mama, please look out and see what a sweet playmate we have." The mother couldn't resist any longer. She set aside her work, stood up, and walked to the window. The sun had set, leaving the sky painted in the rich, deep hues of purple and gold, the kind of sunset that only winter can produce. The fading light spread across the clouds, giving the world a soft, otherworldly glow. For a moment, the mother's gaze was clear. No dazzling sun, no blinding snow. She could see everything, the whole garden laid out before her. And there they were, her two beloved children, Violet and Peony, playing happily in the snow. But then, as her eyes scanned the scene, something, or rather someone, caught her attention. There in the garden was a small figure, a little girl, dressed entirely in white. Her cheeks were rosy, and her golden hair cascaded in soft ringlets around her face. She was playing with Violet and Peony, running with them, laughing with them, as though she had always been there. Stranger though she was, the little girl seemed to belong, to be as familiar to the children as if they had grown up together, playing side by side all their lives. The three of them, Violet, Peony, and the Snow Child, moved together in perfect harmony, as if they were old friends. The mother stood in the doorway for a moment, watching the scene unfold in the garden, her thoughts spinning. She convinced herself that the mysterious child must be one of the neighbor's daughters, perhaps seeing Violet and Peony playing and running over to join them. It seemed so simple, so innocent. With a soft smile, she stepped outside, intending to invite the little girl inside, where warmth and comfort awaited. The sun had long since dipped below the horizon, and the cold, biting wind had begun to creep into the garden, making the air feel like ice. But as the mother stood there, her hand on the door, something strange washed over her. She paused, hesitating. Was it really a child after all? Or had the wind, so cold and fierce, simply swept up a wisp of snow scattering across the garden, making it appear as though a child were there? She squinted into the gathering twilight, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The more she looked, the more peculiar the little stranger became. The child's face was so pale, so white, its cheeks faintly tinged with pink, and her hair, those golden ringlets, tossed and twirled about in the breeze like something from a dream. And her dress, white as snow and fluttering in the cold wind, was impossible. No mother would send her child out to play dressed like that, especially not in the middle of winter. The mother shivered just looking at the child's feet, bare and exposed to the cold.
Only mother and sister know how insufferably cold it was. But the little girl, she didn't seem to notice. She danced over the snow, her movements so light, so graceful, that her feet barely left a mark in the snow. Violet, trying to keep up, could hardly match her pace, and poor Peony, his short legs struggling to keep up, was lagging behind. At one point, the mysterious child skipped between Violet and Peony, taking a hand of each. With a laugh, she pulled them both forward, and they followed her, caught up in the joy of the moment. But then, something strange happened. Peony, his small fist tingling with cold, pulled his hand away and began rubbing it as if trying to warm it. Violet, too, slowly let go, her face serious, as though she had come to some quiet understanding. "It's better not to hold hands," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of something unknown. The white-robed child didn't respond. She simply danced, her movements as light and carefree as before, as if nothing at all had happened. She seemed untouched by the cold, unfazed by anything in the world. If Violet and Peony chose not to play with her, the little snow child had no need to worry. The brisk, biting west wind seemed to be her constant companion, swirling around her, lifting her and carrying her with the kind of ease that suggested they were old friends, accustomed to each other's presence. It was as if the wind itself had been waiting for her, ready to join in the game. Meanwhile, the mother stood in the doorway, her gaze fixed on the strange scene in the garden. She couldn't quite reconcile what she was seeing. How can a little girl look so much like a flying snowdrift, she wondered, or how can a snowdrift look so much like a little girl? Curiosity tugged at her, and she called out to Violet, her voice quiet and questioning. "Violet, darling, what is this child's name?" she asked. "Does she live nearby?" Violet laughed, a soft sound of amusement. She couldn't understand why her mother wasn't grasping something so simple, so clear. "Oh, Mama, this is our little snow sister, the one we've just been making." Peony, hearing the conversation, ran over to his mother, his face beaming with the innocence only a child could possess. He looked up at her, his voice filled with wonder. "Yes, Mama, this is our snow image. Isn't she a nice little child?" Before the mother could respond, something else caught her eye. A flock of snowbirds appeared out of nowhere, flitting through the air with their tiny wings beating against the cold. Naturally, they avoided Violet and Peony, but what happened next was strange. The birds flew straight to the white-robed child, fluttering around her with an eagerness that seemed more than mere instinct. They alighted on her shoulders, her arms, and even her outstretched hands. The little snow girl welcomed them, her expression full of delight, as if these tiny creatures were old friends. She held out both hands, inviting them to land. The birds crowded around her, each one fighting for space, their wings fluttering in the air, their soft bodies pressing together in a flurry of motion. One bird nestled into the warmth of her chest, while another gently brushed its beak against her lips, as if to kiss her. It was a scene of such joy and serenity that even Violet and Peony, standing off to the side, couldn't help but laugh at the spectacle. They watched in awe as their new playmate seemed to become one with the snowbirds, sharing in their merriment as if they were part of their world. The moment felt magical, almost otherworldly. It was as if the snow itself had come to life, and the creatures of winter had accepted the little snow sister as one of their own.
"Violet," said her mother, her voice filled with confusion, "tell me the truth, without any more jokes. Who is this little girl?" Violet, hearing the tone of her mother's voice, looked up at her seriously, surprised by the question. She had already explained this so many times, hadn't she? Her expression softened as she spoke, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "My darling Mama," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "I've told you the truth. This is our little snow sister, the one Peony and I have made. Peony will tell you the same thing, won't you, Peony?" "Yes, Mama,"
Peony echoed, his little face earnest and solemn as he looked up at his mother, his round cheeks a vibrant crimson. "This is our snow child. Isn't she nice? But, Mama, her hand is, oh, so very cold." The mother, still unsure, was about to ask another question when suddenly the sound of the street gate opening interrupted her thoughts. There, appearing through the cold air, was Mr. Lindsay, Violet and Peony's father. He was wrapped up in a heavy pilot cloth coat, with a fur cap pulled low over his ears and the thickest gloves imaginable covering his hands. He looked weary, his face flushed and pinched from the cold, but there was a satisfied, contented air about him, like a man who had worked hard all day and was finally coming home to rest. His eyes brightened when he saw his family, though a faint hint of surprise crossed his face when he noticed them standing in the garden in such bitter cold, long after the sun had set. But it wasn't long before he noticed something, or rather someone else. A small, pale figure was dancing about in the snow, swirling and twirling like a delicate, ethereal snow wreath. Above her head, a flock of snowbirds fluttered, their tiny wings beating in the air as if they were drawn to her. "What little girl is that?" Mr. Lindsay asked, his voice practical and concerned. Surely her mother must be out of her mind to let her go out in this kind of weather. Only that flimsy white gown and those paper-thin slippers? It's freezing out here. His wife, still standing in the doorway, looked back at him with a bemused expression. "My dear husband," she began, "I know as much about the little thing as you do. I think she's just some neighbor's child who came over to play with Violet and Peony. Our children, though," she added with a small laugh, almost as if she were trying to make light of the situation, "insist that she's some kind of snow image they've been making all afternoon in the garden." As the mother finished speaking, her gaze shifted to the spot where the children had been so diligently working just hours before. What she saw left her stunned. There was no snow child, no frosty figure had been crafted, no mound of snow, nothing but the faintest trace of tiny footprints scattered around an empty space. Her breath caught in her throat. "This is very strange," she thought, her mind racing. "What is strange, dear mother?" Violet asked, her voice full of innocent confusion. "Don't you see? This is our snow image. Peony and I made it because we wanted another playmate. Didn't we, Peony?" "Yes, Papa," Peony chimed in, his little face flushed with excitement. "This is our little snow sister. Isn't she beautiful? But she gave me such a cold kiss." The mother's heart pounded in her chest. Her eyes flicked between her children and the empty spot in the garden. What is going on here, she wondered, her thoughts a blur. "Oh, nonsense, children." Mr. Lindsay's voice broke through the tension, his tone as practical and grounded as ever. "Don't tell me you've made a living figure out of snow. Come on now, wife. This little stranger can't stay out in the cold any longer." His expression softened as he turned toward the snow child. "We'll bring her inside. She can have some warm bread and milk to make her comfortable. After that, I'll ask around the neighbors, or send the city crier through the streets to announce a lost child." His words were filled with concern, but there was something in the air, a subtle shift that made the mother hesitate. She watched him move toward the snow child, his intentions clear. But Violet and Peony weren't about to let their new playmate be taken inside. Both children rushed forward, grabbing their father's hands with surprising urgency. "Papa, no!" Violet cried, her voice trembling with the weight of her belief. "It's true. This is our snow girl. She can't live any longer than while she breathes the cold wind. Don't bring her into the warm room." "Yes, father," Peony shouted, stamping his little foot with such force that it left a print in the snow. "This is nothing but our little snow child. She won't love the hot fire." The mother stood frozen, torn between the earnestness of her children's words and the cold, unshakable logic of her husband. There was a growing tension in the air, as if the very atmosphere had thickened with the weight of their belief and the strange reality unfolding before them. "Nonsense, children! Nonsense! Nonsense! Nonsense!" Mr. Lindsay exclaimed, a mix of exasperation and reluctant amusement coloring his voice. He thought his children's insistence on the snow child's existence was nothing but childish folly. "Run into the house at once. It's far too late for playing now. I'm going to take care of this little girl, or she'll catch her death of cold." But Violet and Peony didn't budge. They stood firm, their expressions as serious as ever, their voices rising as they called after him. "Papa, please," Violet begged, her voice trembling with emotion. "She can't come inside. You don't understand. She's a snow child. She belongs in the cold." "Yes, Papa," Peony shouted, stamping his little foot with such force that it left a print in the snow. "This is nothing but our little snow child. She won't love the hot fire." The mother, who had been quietly observing the entire exchange, spoke again, her voice soft but tinged with wonder. She had been watching the snow child intently, and a strange thought began to grow in her mind. "Husband, my dear husband," she said, her voice lower now as if to shield her words from the laughter of her family, "there's something strange about all this. I know you'll think me foolish, but could it be that some invisible angel has been drawn to our children's pure hearts and their innocent faith? Could it be that for just a moment one of those angels played with them in the snow, and now what we see before us is the miracle of their simple belief?" She paused, almost embarrassed by her own words, as if the idea might sound too ridiculous. "No, no, don't laugh at me. I see how foolish it sounds." Mr. Lindsay stopped in his tracks and burst out laughing. "My dear wife, you're as much a child as Violet and Peony." And in a sense, he was right. For all her maturity, there was something in her heart, a childlike simplicity and pure faith that had never quite faded, even as the years had passed. She had a way of seeing the world through eyes unclouded by the skepticism of adulthood. Sometimes these innocent perspectives led her to glimpse truths so profound that others dismissed them as nonsense.
But Mr. Lindsay, ever the practical man, was determined to take charge. He broke away from the children's pleading voices, stepping into the garden with his heavy steps crunching through the snow. He was determined to bring the little stranger inside, whether she wanted to or not. As he approached, the flock of snowbirds took flight, fluttering away in a flurry of movement. The snow child, too, moved back, her steps light as air. She shook her head as if to say, "Don't touch me." Then, with a playful glint in her eyes, she darted through the deep snow, leading Mr. Lindsay farther into the garden. He stumbled in the snow, falling face first with a soft thud. As he clambered to his feet, snow clinging to his coat, he looked every bit as white and wintry as the snow image itself. His breath came in short bursts, visible in the crisp air, and he was dusted in snowflakes from head to toe. It was an absurd scene, yet in that moment it felt as though the line between reality and fantasy had blurred, leaving the father standing there, looking like just another part of the winter landscape, a figure lost in the snow, as much a mystery as the strange child he pursued. As Mr. Lindsay struggled through the garden, some of the neighbors, peering out of their windows, couldn't help but wonder what in the world had possessed poor Mr. Lindsay to chase a snowdrift across his yard. The wind was picking up, and the snowflakes were swirling in all directions. They watched in bemusement, as if he were the one caught in the storm, running after a phantom. But the man's determination never wavered. After much effort, he finally cornered the little snow child. She had nowhere left to run, and he thought he had her at last. His wife, who had been watching from the warmth of the house, was struck by something she hadn't noticed before. As the snow child was driven into the corner, she began to shimmer, sparkle even. A cold, frosty light surrounded her like a halo of ice. She glistened bright as a star, casting an ethereal glow in the fading daylight. The sight was so strange, so out of place in the mundane world of winter, that the wife stood transfixed. Her eyes never left the glowing figure, wondering why her husband seemed utterly unaware of what she could clearly see. "Come, you odd little thing," Mr. Lindsay called, his voice full of gentle authority, as he reached out and grabbed the child's hand. "I've caught you now. No more running about. I'm going to make you comfortable, whether you like it or not. We'll put some warm stockings on your cold feet, a thick shawl around your shoulders. I'm afraid your little nose is frostbitten, but don't worry, we'll make it all better. Come along." With a broad, benevolent smile and cheeks as red as a winter apple from the cold, he led the snow child toward the house. She followed, her steps slow, as if the very life had drained out of her. The glow around her had faded, and now she appeared less like a magical being and more like a tired, fading winter breeze. Once so vibrant, now she was pale and dull, as if the life within her was slowly slipping away. As Mr. Lindsay ascended the steps, Violet and Peony watched with tear-filled eyes. The tears froze on their cheeks before they could even fall, caught in the chill of the air. They pleaded with their father, their voices choked with emotion. "Papa, please don't bring her in," Violet begged, her words trembling. "Not bring her in?" Mr. Lindsay exclaimed, genuinely puzzled. "My little Violet, you're being silly. She's freezing, her little hands almost as cold as ice. My gloves are no match for it. Would you have her freeze to death?" The wind howled around them, the world outside becoming a blur of snow and shadow, but the growing sense of something unnatural hung in the air, unnoticed by Mr. Lindsay, as he carefully guided the child up the steps and toward the warmth of the house. Violet and Peony stood frozen, their hearts heavy with a dread they couldn't fully explain. They knew, deep in their bones, that this wasn't just about cold or warmth. Something was happening, something they couldn't stop.
As Mr. Lindsay led the snow child into the warmth of the house, his wife lingered behind, her eyes still fixed on the strange figure. She couldn't quite place it. Was it a dream? Or had something truly unnatural occurred? She leaned forward, her breath fogging up the window as she gazed intently at the snow child. And then, there it was. The delicate print of Violet's fingers was visible on the child's neck. It was so faint, so subtle, that it could easily have been mistaken for a trick of the light. But no, there was a small, unmistakable impression, as though Violet had gently patted the figure while shaping it, and a part of her touch had remained, a lingering trace that seemed almost too real to be a coincidence. "After all, husband," the mother murmured, her voice filled with wonder, "I can't help it. I think she really does look like a snow image. I almost believe she was made of snow." A gust of wind from the west blew through the open door, causing the snow child to shimmer once more, her form sparkling like a distant star in the night sky. "Snow?" Mr. Lindsay repeated, his tone skeptical but kind as he ushered the child further inside. "No wonder she looks like snow. She's half frozen, poor little thing. But a good fire will fix everything." Without hesitation, the ever-practical man continued on his mission, still convinced that his good sense would solve whatever mystery this child represented. He gently led her to the hearth, guiding her away from the harsh, bitter cold of the outdoors and into the cozy warmth of the parlor. The warmth of the house enveloped them as they entered, a stark contrast to the icy air outside. The Heidenberg stove, glowing with an intense, fiery orange light, crackled and hissed in the corner. The water atop the stove bubbled with a strange, almost anxious energy, its steam curling up toward the ceiling.
The room smelled rich with warmth and wood-burning embers. The thermometer by the door, farthest from the stove, read a blistering 80 degrees. The entire parlor, draped in deep red curtains and furnished with a plush crimson carpet, felt like an oven compared to the biting cold just outside. It was a perfect sanctuary, a perfect inviting sanctuary for the little snow child. The moment Mr. Lindsay placed her on the hearthrug, right in front of the stove, she seemed to sag under the weight of the warmth. She drooped, her ethereal glow fading as she was brought closer to the fire, as though the heat was melting away the very essence of her being. "Now she'll be comfortable," Mr. Lindsay said with a pleased smile, rubbing his hands together in satisfaction. "Make yourself at home, my child." His words, though kind, were laced with an underlying tone of finality, as if this simple act of kindness would resolve everything. But the way the snow child sagged, her once bright and frosty form now subdued by the warmth, hinted that something else entirely was happening, something not so easily fixed with the comforts of home. Violet and Peony stood in the doorway, watching the scene unfold, their hearts heavy with a growing sense of dread. They knew deep down that no amount of warmth could undo what had already been set in motion. Sad, drooping, and almost lifeless, the snow child stood on the hearthrug, her small white form wilting under the intense heat of the stove. The warmth blasted through her, like a sickness, leaching the very essence of her being. Her once vibrant figure, sparkling with cold light, now seemed to melt, the glow fading like a dying star. With a flicker of something almost like longing, she turned her gaze toward the window. There, through the crimson curtains, she could see the snow-covered rooftops, the stars glittering frostily above, and the silent, aching beauty of the cold night. The wind rattled the window panes, whispering its icy summons to her, but she stood still, caught in the suffocating warmth of the hearth, her form now drooping as though she were already fading away. But to Mr. Lindsay nothing seemed amiss. His practical, sensible mind could not perceive what was unraveling right before him.
"Come, wife," he said cheerfully, oblivious to the growing unease around him. "Let's give her a pair of thick stockings and a woolen shawl. And tell Dora to bring her some warm supper as soon as the milk boils. Violet, Peony, you two amuse our little friend while I take care of things. She's just feeling out of sorts from being in a new place. I'll go around to the neighbors and see where she belongs." The mother, shaken by the cold, delicate aura of her thoughts, reluctantly gave way to the practicality of her husband. She turned to find the stockings and shawl, her own intuition now muffled by the firm logic of Mr. Lindsay. Violet and Peony, however, could not ignore the strange stillness of their little snow sister, who had become but a shadow of the vibrant, frosty being they had made. Despite their pleas, Mr. Lindsay marched out the door, closing it with care behind him. He barely made it to the street gate when the piercing shrieks of Violet and Peony reached his ears. At once he turned back, his heart quickening with a strange sense of foreboding. His wife's face appeared at the window, white with terror. "Husband, husband," she cried, her voice strained as if she were speaking from a dream. "There is no need to search for the child's parents any more." Violet and Peony's frantic voices followed, their words tumbling out in an urgent rush. "We told you, father," they screamed as he re-entered the parlor. "You should never have brought her in. Our poor, dear, beautiful little snow sister. She's thawed." Mr. Lindsay froze in his tracks. His eyes snapped toward the hearth where the snow child had been standing just moments before, and there, where she had once been, was only a wet patch on the rug, like the remains of a dream that had slipped away before he could catch it. The warmth had consumed her. The snow child, the ethereal creation of cold and winter, had vanished into nothingness. The father stood frozen, staring at the empty hearth where the snow child had once stood so delicately, like a fragile promise of winter.
A faint, shivering unease gripped his heart as he saw the two children, their tear-streaked faces a reflection of the dismay that gripped his own. He could not deny the strangeness of it all, the way the warmth had undone what was once so pure, so unreal. His thoughts scrambled, trying to rationalize what he had just witnessed. He could feel his own certainty waver as the inexplicable moment unraveled before him. Anxiety settled in his chest as he looked at his wife for an explanation, but the words she offered only deepened the mystery. The parlor was empty now. No trace of the snow child remained, save for the damp remnants on the rug. His wife could only explain that when summoned by the children's cries, she found nothing more than a heap of snow, which, as she gazed at it, evaporated into the air like a wisp of forgotten magic. "And there you see all that is left of it," she whispered, her voice barely audible as she pointed to the small pool of water now resting in front of the stove. Violet's voice quivered through her tears, reproachful yet gentle. "Yes, Father, there is all that is left of our dear little snow sister." Peony, his face red with frustration and grief, stamped his little foot, shaking his tiny fist in a gesture of frustration and blame. "Naughty father! You told you how it would be. What for did you bring her in?" It was then that Mr. Lindsay's gaze fell on the Heidenberg stove. The isinglass door flickered with a deep, ominous glow, its red eyes seeming to burn with malevolent triumph, as if the stove itself reveled in the destruction it had caused. The warmth that it had offered so kindly had turned the fragile miracle into nothing more than a pool of melted snow and sorrow.
The realization dawned on him slowly, and with it came a sense of creeping dread. Here, in the simplest of moments, was one of those rare instances when common sense could no longer be his guide. The snow image, the delicate, ethereal creation of his children's pure hearts, had vanished into nothingness. To his rational mind, it was a mere illusion, an imagination of childhood. Yet there was no denying the eerie truth of what had happened. In that moment, Mr. Lindsay felt the weight of an unspoken lesson, something far greater than the loss of a child's plaything. It was a reminder that some things, no matter how benign they may seem, must be handled with care. In their well-meaning attempts to protect and nurture, even the most benevolent intentions can bring harm. The warmth of the parlor, suitable for the flesh and blood of Violet and Peony, had been a death sentence for the snow child, a cruel and irreversible consequence of the father's well-meaning actions. And so, in the stillness of the parlor, as the evening darkened, Mr. Lindsay found himself confronted not just by the absence of the snow image, but by a deeper truth that would haunt him for days to come. What is good for one being may be ruinous to another, and no amount of common sense could ever explain away the magic that had slipped quietly through their fingers. And so, in his unshakable certainty, Mr. Lindsay returned to the realm of the practical. The profound mystery that had unfolded right before his eyes, something that had defied explanation and left him in silent wonder, was quickly swept away by the familiar concerns of daily life. He turned his gaze toward the mundane, the concrete, the things he could touch and measure. "Wife," he said, breaking the silence with a matter-of-fact tone, "see what a quantity of snow the children had brought in on their feet. It has made quite a puddle here before the stove. Pray tell Dora to bring some towels and mop it up." And there it was, the quiet restoration of normalcy. The snow, the miracle, the fragile snow child, gone. What remained were the damp footprints on the rug, the quiet hum of the stove, and the flickering light of the parlor. A warm fire, a few towels, and a reminder of the children's play, the everyday world untroubled by the inexplicable. Mr. Lindsay, with his practical mind, had already moved on. The mystery of the snow image, whatever it might have been, had been relegated to the realm of imagination in his mind, and life would go on as it always had. But in the hearts of Violet and Peony, a different truth lingered, one that their father would never understand, for it was a truth that transcended common sense.
Not all miracles are meant to be explained. And so the world turned once again, mundane, predictable, and ever so grounded in its unyielding logic. But somewhere, in the corners of their hearts, the memory of the snow child, with its ethereal presence and brief shimmering life, would remain, a reminder of the magic that the world could hold if only one was willing to believe.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.